She died on a Tuesday morning. It was quiet. No storm, no warning, just a phone call that shattered everything. I still remember how my hands trembled as I held the phone, hearing the words but not processing them. Your aunt passed away in her sleep. Peacefully. Peacefully. As if the word could soften the blow. As if it could rewrite the years of silence between us. The silence I never understood until I found the dress. I hadn't seen Annalise in over 10 years. Growing up, she was a shadowy figure in family conversations, spoken of in hushed tones, sometimes with affection, other times with sharp disapproval. My mother called her eccentric. My father never spoke of her at all. When I was 7, I remember Elise came to one of my birthday parties wearing a silver scarf and laughing too loudly. The other parents gave her odd looks. After that, she disappeared from our lives completely. I only knew her through old photographs of her in flowy dresses, with a warm, crooked smile that never quite reached her eyes. When the lawyer called to inform me I was the sole heir to her apartment, I thought it was a mistake. But he insisted. She had left everything to me. Me. The nephew she hadn't spoken to in over a decade. I didn't know what to feel. Grief, maybe. Guilt, definitely. But mostly curiosity. Why me? Why now? The apartment was a second-floor walk-up in an old building tucked behind a faded row of shops. The stairs creaked, the walls were yellowed with age, and the air carried the scent of forgotten time dust, lavender, and something like worn paper. I expected to find clutter, the chaos of a woman who lived alone for too long. But everything was neat, organized, as if she'd known she wouldn't be coming back. I spent the first hour just walking through the rooms, touching things gently, like I was afraid they'd crumble. Books lined the walls, novels, poetry, psychology, fashion. Her bedroom was untouched, bed made, vanities still laid out with brushes and perfume bottles. It didn't feel abandoned. It felt like she was still there, just out of sight. I found the note that night, in a drawer in the wardrobe, tucked beneath a layer of scarves, folded precisely. Just one line, in her handwriting. Now it's your turn. Beneath it, wrapped in thin tissue paper, was a dress. It was simple. A knee-length satin piece in deep burgundy, with a cinched waist and delicate buttons along the side. Elegant. Feminine. And mine, apparently. I didn't understand. I stared at it for a long time, holding it in my hands, feeling its softness, its weight. I should have laughed. I should have put it back in the drawer and walked away. But something in me froze. My heart pounded. My skin tingled. And in the pit of my stomach, something stirred, something like recognition. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind wouldn't stop racing. I kept hearing her voice in my head, though I hadn't heard it in years, saying those words. Now it's your turn. Turn for what? I waited 2 days before I dared open her closet. What I found made my knees buckle. The dresses, the wigs, the makeup, the shoes, they weren't just the remnants of an eccentric woman's wardrobe. They were a history, a secret life, and not just hers. Hidden beneath the floorboards, I found an old shoebox filled with photographs. Elise, yes, but not always as Elise. There were pictures of her in suits, with short hair, stern expressions. Then others, her face softer, her smile freer, her body shaped by flowing dresses and bright lipstick. And then, a photo I didn't expect. A child.
A boy. Me.
Wearing a pink tutu, giggling. Annalise was beside me, her arm around my shoulder, both of us beaming. I didn't remember the moment, but the joy on my face was undeniable. Suddenly, the years of discomfort made sense. The awkwardness I felt when my parents told me to act like a boy. The shame that gripped me when I'd sneak into my mother's closet, try on her heels, only to rip them off when I heard footsteps. The fear I couldn't name. The longing I couldn't explain. She knew. Annalise had seen it in me. She'd remembered when I couldn't. And she'd left the dress as a key. An invitation. I locked the apartment door. I turned off my phone. And I sat with that dress in my lap for hours. At some point, I slipped it on. My hands trembled as I buttoned it up. My breath hitched as I looked in the mirror. And I cried. Not because I looked beautiful or silly or anything like that. But because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was pretending. The next week became a blur of discovery. Every drawer, every box, every journal of hers I found revealed more of the life she had lived in secret and sometimes not so secretly. Her letters spoke of pain, rejection from her parents, the time she was fired for showing up as herself, the one woman she loved who loved her back but couldn't stay, and her deepest regret, leaving me behind. She wrote about seeing something in me, something my parents were too scared to name. She wrote about how she wanted to help but was told to stay away, that I needed normalcy, that her influence was dangerous. But she never stopped hoping I'd find my way. And somehow, I had. Each day I spent in that apartment chipped away at the shell I didn't know I had been living inside. I started trying on more clothes. I read her journals out loud. I put on makeup for the first time and laughed at how bad I was. Then cried when I got it right. I found an old wig of hers, dark brown, shoulder length. I wore it while looking through old photo albums. I imagine her standing behind me, nodding, smiling to be by the end of the month. I was calling myself Liana. It was a name I'd once thought about in high school, in the dark, in silence. It had always felt like mine, even if I was too afraid to claim it. But the world outside Elise's apartment didn't know Liana. The world knew someone else. My friends.
My job.
My family. I didn't know how to reconcile the two. I didn't even know if I wanted to. But something had changed. I couldn't go back to the way things were. The first person I told was my best friend, Jonah. We met for coffee, and I wore a hoodie and jeans to feel safer. But my nails were painted. He noticed immediately. He asked, I hesitated. Then I told him everything. He didn't say anything for a long time. Just looked at me. Then said, I've never seen you look this calm. That night, I cried again. But not all responses were kind. When I tried to talk to my mother, she hung up on me. Told me I was being ridiculous. That Elise had poisoned my mind from the grave. My father sent a text, You're not my son anymore. And yet, for the first time, I wasn't broken by their words. I was angry. I was hurt, but not broken. Because Elise had given me something stronger than their approval. She had given me truth, legacy, permission. She had left me one dress and a note. Now it's your turn. Her words echo in me still. When I walk into the world as Liana, when I face the stares and the silence and the occasional smiles. When I get it wrong and when I get it right. When I look in the mirror and see not just myself but her, too. I don't know how this story ends. Maybe I find love. Maybe I lose everything. Maybe I become someone she'd be proud of. Or maybe I already have. But what I know is this. She didn't just leave me a dress. She left me myself. The weeks that followed were both terrifying and strangely beautiful. I stayed in Elise's apartment longer than I had planned. I told work I needed personal time, and for once, I didn't lie. Every morning, I'd make coffee in her chipped blue mug and sit by the window where sunlight spilled across the floor like warm silk. I would read her letters over and over again. Some of them were addressed to no one. Some were written to me, though she never sent them. One of the letters haunts me still. She wrote, I see you in my dreams sometimes. You're wearing colors. You're laughing. I don't know if it's real or just a wish, but if you ever feel lost, I hope you find this. I hope you remember who you were before they told you who to be. I kept it folded in my wallet, like a lifeline. The more time I spent in that apartment, the more I felt her presence, not like a ghost, but a guide. Her shoes fit me too perfectly. Her makeup shades matched my skin tone exactly. It was eerie at first, like she'd been preparing it for me. Like she'd known I would come here, eventually. But then came the nightmares. Some nights I'd wake up soaked in sweat, heart hammering, hearing my mother's voice scream my dead name in the dark. Sometimes I'd dream of walking down a hallway lined with mirrors, but each reflection showed a different version of me.
A boy.
A girl. A stranger. A child. I would cry in my sleep and wake up not remembering why. The therapy session started after one particularly bad night when I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize who I was on the outside or the inside. I needed help. So I called a local LGBTQ+ center Elise had donated to. I found her name on a plaque near the entrance. Patron of Authenticity, it read. They paired me with Dr. Molina, a trans woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a softer voice. She didn't try to push labels onto me. She just listened. For the first time, someone really listened. I told her about Elise, about the dress, about the fear that still gripped me when I walked outside in a skirt, about how sometimes I felt alive and radiant, and other times like I was losing my mind. She smiled gently one day and said, "Transformation isn't about becoming someone else. It's about finally being allowed to show who you are." That line stuck with me. It echoed when I came out to my sister, Noreen. She cried at first not out of anger, but because she'd known something was off for years. She admitted that she'd always felt like I was hiding behind myself. When I showed her a picture of me as Liana, she covered her mouth and whispered, "You look like freedom." She was the first family member to call me by my name. The first to say, "I see you." I started documenting everything. Not publicly, at least not yet, but in a private video journal. Every day I'd record short clips, my voice as it changed, my face as it softened, my doubts, my triumphs. Some nights I'd just stare at the lens and talk to Elise like she could hear me. One night I asked her out loud, "Why me? Why not someone stronger?" Then I remembered something she once wrote. "We are not chosen because we are strong. We become strong because we are chosen." I began to understand what she meant. By the third month, I started going out in public more often as Liana. At first, just short walks. Then grocery stores. Coffee shops. The first time someone addressed me as ma'am, I nearly cried in the aisle between the cereal boxes. Not because it was perfect, but because I was seen. But not all moments were kind. One afternoon, I was followed home. A man on the train kept staring. When I got off, so did he. I took longer routes, ducked into a convenience store to buy gum I didn't need, hoping he'd leave. But he was still there when I stepped out. He cornered me near Elise's building, smirked, and said, "You're not fooling anyone." I don't know how I kept from breaking. But I didn't run. I looked him in the eye and said, "I'm not trying to." He didn't expect that. Eventually he walked away, muttering something I didn't catch. I stood there, shaking, until a neighbor saw me and asked if I was okay. I nodded, but I wasn't. That night, I stared at Elise's photo on the dresser and whispered, "How did you survive this?" Her silence was heavier than usual. But in the morning, I found something I hadn't noticed before: a leather-bound journal tucked in the back of her bookshelf, behind old cookbooks and tarot decks. Inside was a confession. She had once tried to detransition. Years ago, after losing a job and getting attacked on the street, she had cut her hair, thrown away her dresses, and lived as a man again for almost 2 years. She described those years as the loneliest of her life. "I became invisible," she wrote, "but not the good kind. I disappeared from myself." She wrote about the pain of wearing clothes that felt like a costume, the constant pretending, the slow death of her spirit. Until one day, she opened an old box, found her favorite blue dress, and put it on. She said she stood in front of the mirror and cried for 6 hours. That day, she became Elise again. She ended the entry with, "You can't unknow the truth. You can lie to others, but your soul never forgets." I closed the journal and held it to my chest. I finally understood why she left the dress. It wasn't just a gift. It was a mirror.
A map.
A message. She was telling me I didn't have to disappear. That weekend, I packed up some of her belongings: books, old records, trinkets she'd collected, and donated them to the center in her name. I kept the dress. Of course. I kept a few wigs, a pair of heels that somehow still made me feel like I was walking in her footsteps. Then I made a decision. I was going to move. Not just from the apartment, but from the shadows. I needed a city where I could start again, where Liana could live openly, not in secret. I chose Portland. It was where Elise had always dreamed of living before she got too sick. I found a small studio there, close to the river, walking distance to bookstores and tea shops. Noreen helped me move. As we packed boxes, she paused and held up a photo of me in Elise's dress. "You know," she said softly, "I think she always knew this was who you were." I nodded. I think I always did, too. When we arrived in Portland, I walked down to the waterfront in the evening, watching the sky turn from gold to violet. I stood on the bridge and whispered her name. Just once.
Elise.
I don't know if she heard me, but I felt lighter. It's been a year now. I'm on hormones. I've started meeting others in the community. I've dated awkwardly, clumsily, sometimes painfully. But I've laughed more this year than in the past 10 combined. My voice is changing. My wardrobe is changing. My world is changing. I still have her dress. I don't wear it often. It's delicate. But sometimes on the hardest days I take it out, hold it close, and remember what it gave me. It gave me a name, a story, a second chance. And when I feel like giving up, when the weight of it all feels too much, I look in the mirror and say to myself, "Now it's your turn." And I keep going. Some nights, even now, I wake up feeling like the air around me is too thick to breathe. There are dreams where I'm back in my childhood bedroom, staring into a closet filled with clothes that never belonged to me. In the dream, I try to pull something off the hanger, just a single item, anything soft, but my hands pass right through. No matter how hard I try, I can't touch it. I can't reach myself. And then I wake up.
Alone.
In a new city, in a new life, with a name that finally fits but still carrying the weight of everything that came before. There's this idea people have that coming out is like flipping a switch. That once you say the words, once you step into your identity, it all makes sense. That the fear melts, the shame disappears, and you're finally free. But the truth is, it's messier than that. Some days I wake up as Liana and feel like I'm glowing. Other days I walk past a mirror and flinch. There are still parts of me that ache with confusion, parts that grieve for the years I lost trying to be someone I never was. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if Elise ever felt that too, even at the end. The silence she left behind was deafening. She never got to see me like this. She never got to see me become. There are days I'm angry at her for not reaching out sooner, for not fighting harder to be in my life, for keeping her own story locked in journals instead of telling me directly. But then I think maybe she was scared, too. Maybe leaving the dress was all the courage she had left. It was enough. I've started volunteering at the same LGBTQ+ center she supported. I help teens pick out clothes for their first time presenting. I teach basic makeup lessons, even though I'm still learning myself. I sit with kids whose parents stopped speaking to them. I hold their stories the way Elise held mine in silence, with understanding, with gentleness. One of the kids, Kai, reminds me of me at 16. Sharp-tongued but fragile, full of questions they don't know how to ask. One night, after group, they stayed behind while I cleaned up. They asked, "Do you ever miss who you were before?" I thought about that for a long time. "No," I said quietly. "But I mourn for the person I pretended to be. Because he had to carry a lot of pain to protect me." Kai nodded slowly. "I think I'm still pretending." I reached into my bag and pulled out the photo of Elise and me from when I was a kid, the one where I'm in the tutu. I handed it to them. "She left me this," I said. "And one dress." That was it. But it changed everything. They stared at the photo for a long time. "She looks happy."
She was.
That day. And then, as if the universe knew I needed it, Kai whispered, "I hope I get a day like that." I smiled.
You will.
Maybe sooner than you think. That night, I cried again. Not out of sorrow, but because I realized what Elise had done was bigger than just me. She had planted something. A seed. A thread. A continuation. By trusting me with her truth, she let me become mine. And through me, it lives on. I've started writing again, really writing. Elise's journals inspired me. I'm piecing together her life, one entry at a time, and weaving it into something I hope to publish someday. A memoir, a tribute, a bridge between generations of silence. I call it the dress she left me. It's not just about clothes. It never was. It's about inheritance, identity, the quiet, powerful act of being seen. It's about how one person's courage, even if incomplete, can awaken someone else's. I don't know if I'll ever get closure with my parents. Maybe I don't need it anymore. Maybe I've found family elsewhere in people like Kai, in strangers who've become friends, in the quiet resilience I wake up with every morning, and in Elise. Always Elise. The last time I wore the dress, the real one, I stood in front of a mirror lit with soft yellow bulbs. My makeup was light. My hair curled at the ends. I wore simple earrings she once owned. I looked at myself and whispered, "Do you see me?" And for the first time, I think I did. I saw her in me. I saw myself in her. I saw a beginning, not an end. Maybe someday, I'll leave something behind for someone else. A letter, a name, a promise. Maybe they'll open a drawer and find it, trembling like I did. Maybe they'll put it on and finally feel real. And maybe, just maybe, when they look into the mirror, they'll hear me whispering back, "Now it's your turn." There's a photograph I keep on my bedside table. It's a small Polaroid, slightly faded at the corners, of me standing in Elisa's apartment doorway. I'm wearing the burgundy dress, the first one. My posture is stiff, unsure. My eyes are red from crying, and the makeup is uneven. But I'm smiling. It's the smile that gets me every time. Not because it's perfect, but because it's mine. The first one that ever belonged to me. I took that photo myself with a timer on her old instant camera. I think, in some strange way, I was hoping she could see it. That wherever she was, she'd know I said yes. Some nights, when the silence feels heavy or the world outside feels too sharp, I sit in bed and hold that photo like it's a lifeline. And I remember that none of me would exist if not for her small act of faith. A dress. A note. A whisper through time. My apartment now is small, but warm. Filled with books and candles, soft throws, and little trinkets from antique stores. I've started collecting things that remind me of Elise: vintage compacts, silk scarves, old jazz records. It's like building a shrine not to her memory, but to her legacy. I've decorated the space with affirmations, quotes from authors and artists and activists, people who remind me that truth is not always loud, but it's persistent. One of my favorites is written above my desk on a slip of paper. "You do not owe the world your silence." There are days I still struggle. I don't want to pretend that everything fell into place after I claimed my name. Dysphoria still lingers like a fog some mornings. Some people still misgender me. Others stare too long, or look away too quickly. I'm not always strong, but I am always real. And that counts for something. I started a blog a few months ago. Just small posts at first. Pieces of Elise's letters, bits of my journal entries, photos of the journey. I didn't think anyone would read it, but they did. Quietly, gently, people began to reach out. Some told me their own stories. Others said they'd never had the words before, but now maybe they did. One message stood out: a girl named Renee from Minnesota. She wrote, "I found your blog when I was searching for a reason not to give up. I didn't think people like you existed. But now I know you do. And that means maybe I do, too." I read that line over and over. Maybe I do, too. It made me realize how rare, how holy it is to be visible, to not hide, to let your existence be evidence that someone else can survive. I think Elise knew that. I think she left that dress not just for me, but for every part of herself she had to bury. Every time she couldn't be seen. Every moment she was told to be quiet, small, obedient. She gave me her courage, stitched into fabric and ink. And now it lives in me. Sometimes I wonder what I would say if I had one more moment with her. Just one. No time for a long conversation. Just a heartbeat between worlds. I think I'd say, "Thank you. I'm okay now. And I see you." But the truth is, I don't need that moment anymore. Because every morning I wake up and slip into the life she made space for, I am having that moment. Every breath I take as Liana is a continuation of the love she left behind. There's a trail behind us of women and souls and truths that were never allowed to bloom. And maybe, in some small way, I'm watering those roots now. Maybe I'm part of that healing. I've started saving things in a box, letters I've written to my future self, bits of fabric from dresses I've outgrown, photos of places I visited while finally me. I don't know who it's for. Maybe a niece I haven't met yet. Maybe a stranger who finds it someday. Maybe someone who needs it the way I once did. Maybe they'll find it and wonder. Maybe they'll open it and see a note tucked in between the silk and the paper. Just one line. Now it's your turn. Last week, I visited my childhood home for the first time in years. Noreen had convinced our mother to at least meet me Liana for coffee in the garden. It wasn't an apology, not even close. But it was something. A sliver of hope. I hadn't expected anything more than tension and avoidance, but I went anyway. Not for her.
For me.
The house looked the same, but smaller. Quieter. The walls didn't hum the way I remembered as a child. The swing set in the backyard had rusted. My father's old tools still hung neatly in the shed, untouched, like time had preserved them out of guilt. I waited on the back porch, wearing a soft blue cardigan and jeans. Neutral.
Safe.
My hands were shaking, and for a moment, I almost turned back. But then I remembered Elise's letters. Her regret. Her silence. And I stayed. When my mother stepped out, she didn't look at me at first. She brought tea in mismatched mugs, hers floral, mine plain white. She sat. Quiet. Staring out into the yard like the trees could answer the questions she was too afraid to ask. Then, finally, "You look like her." My throat tightened. "I know." More silence. Then a sigh, long, waited. I loved my sister. I just didn't know how to hold what she became. "You didn't have to hold it," I said softly. "You just had to see her." She closed her eyes. And now I have to see it again. There it was. A part of me flared with anger, with pain, with the sting of being reduced to a problem. But instead of running, I just breathed.
Slowly.
Deliberately. "I'm not a reflection of her," I said. "I'm me. But I carry her with me, because she's the only one who ever saw me before I did." My mother didn't speak. She reached into her sweater and pulled out something small. A ring. Gold. Delicate. She placed it between us on the table.
"It was hers," she said.
"She wore it all the time when we were girls." I took it from her jewelry box before she moved out. I thought I was keeping a piece of the sister I'd lost. But now, she pushed it across the table. I picked it up with trembling fingers. It was warm, even though she'd just set it down. "Maybe I'm not ready to say her name again," she said. "But I'm trying to say yours." It wasn't forgiveness. Or understanding. But it was a crack in the wall. A place for light to enter. I left the ring on my finger that night as I sat on the train home, watching the lights of the city blur through the window. My reflection stared back at me, clearer than ever. And in that moment, something clicked. I wasn't living Elise's life. I wasn't retracing her steps or finishing her story. I was building my own with her strength behind me, not in front. I'd survived the darkness. I'd stood in the silence. And I'd spoken. Now I was walking forward. I don't know what comes next. Maybe love. Maybe heartbreak. Maybe more letters. More notes. More days when I can't stop smiling and nights when I still cry without knowing why. But I'll wake up. I'll dress in the skin I finally call home. I'll open the window and let the world see me, even when it doesn't know what to do with me. Because someone left me a dress once. And a note. And every time I feel the old fears creeping in, every time I wonder if I'm strong enough, or real enough, or worth enough, I press my hand to my chest, close my eyes, and whisper, "Now it's my turn." A few months ago, something happened that I wasn't prepared for. An invitation. Not a metaphorical one this time. A real envelope, thick paper, cream-colored, addressed in elegant cursive to Liana Avery. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I opened it slowly, carefully. Inside was a wedding invitation. My cousin Amelia, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. We'd grown up close, but after Elise's disappearance from family gatherings and my own withdrawal from everything that made me feel exposed, we'd drifted. I didn't even know she was engaged. The words on the card blurred as I read them again and again. What caught my eye wasn't just the invite. It was the note scribbled at the bottom. Liana, I hope you come. I miss you. And I think Elise would have wanted this. I held that invitation against my chest and felt something break quietly inside. Not in pain, in relief. Someone had remembered me. Not the version I'd worked so hard to bury, but the one who had emerged from it. Still, I debated for weeks. Should I go? Could I? The thought of seeing all those old family members, the people who had last seen me as someone I no longer was, filled me with dread. I imagined the whispers, the stares, the unspoken judgments behind champagne glasses. But Amelia's note tugged at me. It was a gesture of softness in a family defined by silence. I decided to go. The morning of the wedding, I stood in front of the mirror wearing a soft emerald green dress Elise would have loved. My hair curled gently around my face, and the gold ring from my mother, a quiet offering, rested on my finger. I took a deep breath. Then another. I whispered to my reflection, "You don't need their permission to exist." And I went. The venue was a vineyard, warm and sun-dappled, with lavender blooms lining the path to the reception hall. The moment I stepped onto the gravel driveway, heads turned. I felt at the weight of every stare. Not cruel, not mocking, just stunned. And yet, I walked forward. I saw Amelia near the fountain, radiant in her gown, laughter bubbling from her like water. When she turned and saw me, her eyes widened, and for a split second, I froze. Then she smiled.
Wide.
Without hesitation. She walked straight to me and pulled me into the kind of hug that forgets time. "I didn't know if you'd come," she whispered, "but I prayed you would." I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. She pulled back and looked me up and down. "You look like you. Not like someone else. Like the real you." For the first time in a long time, I felt welcomed. But of course, not everyone knew what to do with me. An older aunt avoided eye contact the whole night. A cousin muttered something about phase to his wife when he thought I wasn't listening. I heard it. I felt it. And I let it roll past me like wind against a mountain. Because every time someone looked confused, I remembered Amelia's embrace. Every time someone hesitated to speak my name, I remembered Kai's message, the kids at the center, and Elise's words scribbled into journals no one else ever read. And when the music started and Amelia asked me to dance, I said yes. We swayed under string lights and moonlight, laughter folding into the night like a secret. "Do you think she'd be proud of us?" she asked softly. I looked up at the stars. Imagined Elise somewhere between them. I think she already is. When I left that night, I didn't cry. Not out of fear or sorrow or shame. I walked away whole.
Full. Seen.
Not because everyone accepted me, but because I did. I no longer need a dress to tell me who I am. I no longer need permission from those who can't see past their own fears. But I still keep that dress, carefully folded in a cedar box at the foot of my bed. It was never about the fabric, the color, or the cut. It was about inheritance, about bravery passed down like a torch in the dark, about a woman who wasn't allowed to live freely and left just enough light behind for someone else to find their way. I don't know if I'll ever meet someone who loves me the way I now love myself. I don't know if I'll have a family that fully sees me. But I do know this. When I'm old, if someone finds that cedar box and lifts the lid, if they find the dress and the photo and the letters, I hope they feel what I felt. I hope they know it's theirs if they need it. And I hope, in that quiet, trembling moment, they'll whisper the same words I did. Now it's my turn. It's strange how something as simple as fabric can hold so much of who we are. The dress doesn't come out much these days, not because I've hidden it away, but because I no longer need it to remember. It served its purpose. It held me when I couldn't hold myself. It spoke when I was too afraid to speak. And now it rests.
Gently.
Like a page you've finished reading, but will never forget. My life now is quieter in some ways, fuller in others. I work part-time at the LGBTQ plus center Elise once donated to. Not just in the background anymore, I lead support circles for adults who are just beginning their journey, many of them older, some retired, some divorced, some still hiding in full view. And every time someone looks at me with fear in their eyes, I see the reflection of who I used to be. A person waiting for permission. I don't give them permission. I give them possibility. One of them, Marta, a 63-year-old former schoolteacher, came to her first meeting dressed in baggy pants and a baseball cap. Her voice was barely a whisper. But at the end of the second week, she stayed behind and said, "I used to wear my sister's dresses. At night, when no one was home. I haven't told anyone that in 40 years." I took her hand. "You just did."
She cried.
I did too. Because the pain doesn't evaporate when we speak our truth. But it becomes lighter when someone hears it. Some nights, after group, I walk home under the orange glow of the streetlights, Elise's ring glinting faintly on my finger, and I think about legacy, not the kind you find in history books or headlines, but the kind passed in silence, in defiance, in a dress folded with care and left with a note. Every month, I write a letter to Elise. I don't know if anyone would understand that, but it keeps me grounded. It keeps her close. Sometimes I read them out loud. Other times I tuck them into a leather-bound journal labeled simply for her. Here's one I wrote recently. Dear Elise, I wore your lipstick shade today, the one called Rosewater. It still smells like powdered sugar and lavender. I met someone who reminded me of you, a laugh that filled the whole room, eyes that knew too much and said too little. I wonder if you'd like her. I've started teaching makeup workshops. Can you believe it?
Me?
I remember the first time I tried eyeliner, how my hand shook so badly, I nearly poked my eye out. You would have laughed. The world still has sharp edges. But I've learned how to walk without cutting myself open. You taught me that. Without ever saying a word.
Thank you.
I miss you.
Love.
Your girl. There's something healing in writing to the dead. Not because I expect an answer, but because in doing so, I keep her alive not as a memory, but as a pulse in everything I do. Not long ago, Kai, now 17, came to one of our Sunday groups, wearing a velvet maroon dress. They spun in a slow circle when they walked in, half shy, half daring someone to say something. No one did. They sat beside me and whispered, "I think I found my dress." I smiled so wide my cheeks hurt. Sometimes we don't realize that when we survive, when we heal, when we allow ourselves to be fully seen, we create mirrors for others. We become the invitation. We become the note. That's what Elise did for me. She didn't know what I would do with it. She didn't know if I'd run, if I'd bury it, if I'd laugh, or burn it, or crumble under the weight of what it meant. But she gave it anyway, as if to say, here. I couldn't finish the story. But maybe you can. And maybe I have. Or maybe I've just started a new one. There's still so much ahead of me. I want to travel. I want to fall in love, not the kind of love that saves you, but the kind that sees you. I want to stand at a podium someday and tell my story to people who still think they're the only ones. I want to live loudly for all the times I was quiet, for all the moments Elise had to bite her tongue just to survive. And I want to leave something behind. I've already started putting together a box. Not just with the dress, but with my journals, Elise's letters, my name tag from the center, a lipstick I once wore to a first date, and the ring hers, then mine, and maybe someday someone else's. One day, someone will find it. They'll open it with trembling hands. They'll unfold the note I've tucked inside.
And it will say, "This was mine.
And now, it's yours. Wear it when you're ready. Now it's your turn.